down to the whole LDI issue and the fact that these pension funds had been exposed in the same way as lots of financial organizations were exposed in 2008. It was a similar type of financial crisis. But nobody talks about that. The mainstream media doesn't talk about that because they want the narrative that it was my fault. And we're now in a situation where Rachel Reeves is doing terrible economics, putting up taxes, putting up regulation, banning fracking, banning oil and gas. And the economy is really in a terrible state. But the big difference between her and me is the Bank of England is backing what she's doing.
Right, she's singing to their tune.
What she's doing. So all of the objective figures are worse. So gilt rates have gone higher under Rachel Reeves than they did under me. Economic growth is much lower than it was when I was in office, but she is not getting anywhere like the level of flack. And that you start asking questions about who is running the country.
Right. No, but this is what is so alarming about what you're saying, because, I mean, correct me if I'm sort of synthesizing this in a sort of too much of a lackadaisical way, but the Bank of England had failed in their job as a regulator. Pension funds were massively overexposed. And it seems to me they deliberately timed their big sell-off of gilts, which was going to have big ramifications on the markets. They deliberately timed this to cover their own backs, to be able to point the finger of blame at you when you then did the mini budget and said, oh, look at the timing, it must have been her. Because if that is true, if the independent Bank of England, which is no longer under really any governance by a sovereign elected parliament, can do that in an attempt to bring down a prime minister because it has messed up, that is deeply foreboding.
It is very, very worrying. And it's why it really radicalized me that time in office, because I'd spent 10 years fighting the system. I knew that the civil service were, not on my side on a lot of the key issues, but I thought fundamentally, given enough pressure, they would do what they needed to do. What I discovered during my time in Number 10 is that they were prepared to be underhand. They were prepared to be seriously underhand in blaming me for their failings so that they could essentially get rid of somebody they didn't want in office.
I mean, that is absolutely shocking. And I think, most of the Anglophone world are waking up now to the idea that there is a so-called deep state, that there are people who are not elected, who are unaccountable, who wield far too much power and influence, who have tried to stop Donald Trump in his tracks by having, a sort of radical policy, the likes of which you want to see happen in the UK, the likes of which you wanted to do as Prime Minister, and in many respects had a mandate to do because the Conservative Party members had chosen you. And that they've managed to destabilise it, and the legacy media just go, oh, well, look at that, it's all Liz Truss's fault. I mean, I don't expect any different from them. But what you're outlining here is